Good evening. It's great to be here. Auntie Joyce, it's good to see you. My voice is always a problem because I talk too much. I was telling somebody I do 3 hours, 40 minutes every day, 5 days a week, 17 and a half hours a week. If I'm emceeing in church, then it's like 20 hours a week, so it's a lot. And the fire you have is like the one I had on radio today. So, I don't know what happened to me this morning, but I just went on a rant, apparently in relation to. So, there's this story about a man who returned 8,400 CDs, which was not his. And Ghanaians were really falling over themselves to commend him. And I understand that, and I agree with that. If it's 5 minutes more, let me know. But my main issue with us was that it's good to celebrate excellence and exceptional behavior and reward good things. But if returning 8,000 CDs is the exception rather than the norm, then we are really far behind. So while not condemning those who were giving him money for that, I was asking why we were so shocked and enamored. And is it that good examples are so few? So I don't know, something happened and I just went on a tangent, started firing the sermons we preach in church and all of that. And I'm happy I'm not the only person who has that fire. And because you have the fire, I won't go fire again. I'll relax. Femi, thank you for inviting me. Femi is the kind of mentor you don't see often, but when you see him, you have a connection. You can tell he's praying for you. You can tell he admires you because a lot of times when I meet him, I'm emceeing or moderating something like this, and he will encourage me. He will appear on my program, and I think it's great because the work we do sets us against powers. So now the main concern is that the passion I used to bash the NDC, when they put me in that meter, they don't feel it against the MPP, so I'm some way. MPP too says, as for me, every day I'm bashing. So it's like persona non grata, and it's very difficult. When there are contentious issues, you are Christian, you have to take a position. And sometimes the parameters of the issue, you don't want to be drawn in because the coordinates are not right. So you are not really sure what to do. And when you criticize the prosperity message and you try and do it carefully, people who hate Christianity then use it as a tool. So you have to be measured in even how you do that. So there's always something you have to do, okay? And I've always been looking for, so this work you've given me, why did you give me this work? To put me in journalists. But in trying to resolve that, I'll spend 3 minutes talking about how I try to practice journalism in holding public officials accountable, and then how I sort of resolve that as a Christian. So journalists all over the world have many principles they follow. One of the best of the principles is put together by the Society for Professional Journalists. They are based in the US. And they have 9 principles of journalism. These are like ideals because I don't know any journalist who lives by all. And the first one they say is that journalism's first obligation is to the truth. And it sounds simple for anybody, but if you're a believer and you know the truth is a person, that means that your obligation, because you see, you can report facts. I always tell people that if you see somebody slap another person and you report that Bernard slapped this person, that is a fact. But that's just part of the truth because probably before the slap there was a provocation. And because we all see from one side, reporting the truth is much more difficult than just spitting out facts. So for me, how I resolve that is to say, my obligation is not just to continually look for the truth, but I have a master who is the truth, right? And if I have met him, his standard is higher than all journalistic standards in the world. So I can do a program that everybody is praising, but my heart smites me. And I can do a program that people will say, Charlie, try, but he's pleased with me. So I have a different master. That's how I resolve it. So my first obligation is to the truth. This is very important. And when I meet Christian journalists, I try to tell them this. When I go to GIJ, even without bringing Christianity in, your obligation being to the truth is more complex than it sounds. It means your obligation is to a standard that many people cannot meet. So as a Christian, I try to please Christ. Second thing, as Reverend Ikuya said, we cannot hold people accountable when we ourselves are not accountable. So yesterday I emceed a program for a friend who runs a construction company, and he complained about three things. First thing he said was that about 90% of the artisans can't lay concrete, even though they've been trained. So there's mediocrity. Second point, he says throughout the process, workers were stealing every day. Stealing cement, stealing paint, stealing toilet rolls, stealing everything. But the third thing he didn't say in public but told me was that what disappointed him the most was that of the 5 or so media houses that covered the event, one of the reporters, one of the sales executives asked him to write a check in his personal name. And he says, but how can you guys be holding government accountable on air and something as basic as the integrity of an invoice, you are asking me to write the check in your name? I'm not going to do that. And he was telling me, he says, he almost said it in public. I said, you should have said it in public. Because a lot of times, we feel that we have a specific set of rules that apply to us because we are journalists. So for me, the key issue is that in analyzing all this issue about power and politics and accountability, it's Proverbs. As in water face answers to face, so a man's heart reveals himself. I must look at myself. So I always tell my journalists that you must strive to be on the straight and narrow. Okay? So for example, managing relationship with politicians. So Mr. Bezra, I admire him a lot. But I can't necessarily call him my friend. You know why? Because journalists must strive to be independent from who they cover. If he's paying my child's school fees, I can't hold him accountable. So these are things we put around ourselves. So once we start compromising those standards, we can't be an effective conveyor of public concerns. So how do I resolve this? As a Christian, I think no effective Christian can be a bad citizen. No, if you are an effective Christian, my summary of the Christian morals, if you look at Matthew 5, 6, and 7, Christ is very clear. His standard is so high. All right, he says somebody asks for your cloak, give him your tunic. Somebody asks you to go 1 mile, go 2 miles. So my point is that if you have a relationship with the truth, your standard is much higher. So you shouldn't be now struggling to do the basics. Okay? So I try to be secretly pure. Christianity is not playing gospel music on the radio as a journalist and preaching every day. It's having a proper moral standard as a journalist. So what gives me power is when politicians come to me, they know that I haven't taken anything from them. It's not because I am eloquent or I am knowledgeable. Right? So I was telling some journalists that the power of a journalist is in his independence from the person he's covering. It's not in how well he's done his research. Right? So I must be secretly pure before God. That means it's not as if every day, because the truth is that Christianity is very fashionable in Ghana. But the people who wrote what we followed, they were minorities. So even though we are in 70%, you must live it as a minority because it's a narrow path. Now, to do that, you must be righteously strict on yourself. So all things are permissible, but all things are not profitable. So there are so many things I cannot do. I was telling somebody, imagine, even my wife's father was a pastor, right? And I've never seen him eat in public. And then imagine, like, the way even we eat, where we go, places we go, the kind of company we keep. You can't do that if you are under. So journalists cannot be seen in certain places. So I try to avoid certain things so that I will not bring the gospel to condemnation. Because the challenge with Christians is that a lot of us profess it, but because we don't live above board, we bring Christianity into disrepute. All right, and Paul said to Timothy, you shouldn't appoint novices as bishops because they are not trained. They will fall into the enemy's trap and bring disrepute to the church. So one of my responsibilities as a Christian is not to malign the church with my, you know what I'm saying? So there are so many things I can't do, so many places I can't go because I'm a believer. And then the third one is that you must be mercifully kind towards others. So it's not just you God, you God, you God. It's also social. So righteously strict to himself and then kind to other people. So even in speaking truth to power, there's a way in which you do it. Now, one of the things that God has helped me to do is that I can be very hard on the politician, but he will never say that I was unfair to him. Right? So I can, you know, in journalism, they try and destroy a politician. It's like the guy comes, he hasn't got his research well, and you systematically break him down, and it's like he's finished. People have accused me of doing that. But that's not the intention, because our loyalty is to the citizen. Right? So sometimes when we expose lies, it's not because we hate people. It's because there's a higher demand for public accountability. But even in doing that, we must not look at faces, but we must do it in a way that is not hate-filled. Which then brings me to some of the social issues and the way we discuss it. And I know my time is almost up. My challenge with some of the things we have tried to do as Christians in this country is that I am not saying we shouldn't call out wrong, but the approach doesn't follow any biblical pattern I know, right? And it worries me. And so people are always trying to draw you into this. For example, the approach we are using to try and stem this marauding force of LGBTQ, I think we should have thought about it a bit more carefully. Because I feel the people leading it, they may mean well, but the approach they are using will be more destructive. Do you understand? And it's one of the challenges I have as a believer that, so before I editorialize on important issues like that or Achimota School, I have to sometimes pray a lot, because you can say something, people are just looking for one strand to use to go and fight the rest of their battles for their life. So in a very ironic way, I have been more careful in entering controversial issues, because whatever I say, so many kids are listening to me in their car, and if I'm not very sure that it's doctrinally sound, and it doesn't, my conscience will not, do you understand? So I don't want to be forced in. So this issue of accountability for me is a mirror issue. Let's live above board, okay? That's what journalists need to do. Christians must shine as light, which is what I try to do. And I will not be popular. Last thing I'll say, when I started this job, I thought God was giving me a platform to excel so that people will glorify his name, that there's a Christian journalist. I realize that's not what the case, okay? God is trying to use this field to raise a voice for himself for a specific time for something. Do you understand? So one of the things you need to do as a believer in the public field is to understand why God put you there. It's very important. So I've spent the first 18 or so years of my 20-year journalism life trying to succeed to prove that I am good. Because among my father's kids, I was the least smart. So in my whole life, I've been trying to show that I'm intelligent. But when you start meeting Christ, he actually tells you that that's not the reason why I put you there. So, and if you understand why he put you there, that regulation is key. And I'm not saying Christianity is idiosyncratic. Sin is sin, okay? But the Bible also says, to him that knows what is right and does not do it, to him it is a sin. So even in my field, there are things that are sinful, which other journalists can get away with. Are you following my logic? So how do we hold people accountable? Let's be true Christians. Let's be proper, because the source of our power is the purity. The source of our power is the integrity. The fact that Daniel and his 3 friends had not eaten the king's meat, which actually is the doctrine of Babylon. So for me, I'm very wary of people trying to use Christianity to achieve their political ends, or using my platform. A lot of my friends on campus don't talk to me because they feel you have a big platform. I want to preach on city. You are not giving me the chance. But the purpose of radio is not to just assemble preachers. Do you understand? And just because that actually desecrates the message, because now the highest bidder, then people who don't even have the right value. So we are very particular about who even preaches. So in manifesting Christianity, it's not just journalism, even managing the radio station. How well do we pay people? What policies do you have? And these are challenges. So, and sometimes when you look at the difficulties on the people you work with, you are more measured in even how you criticize, because you know that, Charlie, even my guys.
So Bernard is on fire.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So for me, this work.
Time out.
Okay, we'll continue in the discussion. You know. So let me just wrap up. This job for me is revealing who I am. And God is using it to teach me an aspect of himself that I did not know. And I think eventually it will be to his glory. I actually believe that. So I think I'll end here. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful.